I remember a time we were running the School of Frontier Missions. It was a training program that I had pioneered with my husband in 2 different locations. And I loved that program. It was good. It had great content. But the problem was it didn't multiply disciples. It didn't actually get us the fruit, the results that we were hoping for. It was an addition model that we were trying to use to produce multiplication and movement, and it simply did not work. And so we had to make changes. You know, many of us, we are kind of on this treadmill, and I wrote about this recently in a blog post where we're running hard, we're growing even in seeing some fruit, but it really isn't multiplying. We're not seeing multiplication of disciples, addition at best. So today on the podcast, we want to talk about that. We want to talk about the system you built for addition and how it won't get you multiplication, but what you can do to change so you'll be able to see things begin to shift towards multiplying. You know, I really sincerely believe it is not the vision that is the problem. No. Anyone who's listening to this podcast or watching it on YouTube, you have vision for multiplication. You want to see disciples of Jesus multiply. You want to start a movement of disciples in your area. And so it's usually not vision that's the problem. And even those other leaders and Christian mission leaders or people around you, pastors or mature believers, if you ask them, they would say that they do. They have a vision for their community. They want to multiply disciples. See, the vision is usually not the problem. It can be sometimes, but you know, sometimes our vision is just limited to what we can do or what our church can do or our mission can do, and that can be a problem. But the biggest problem is that we are running systems that were built to add disciples, not built to multiply disciples. Our systems are built for addition. I started to tell you, and I want to tell you a little bit more about this, how we had pioneered a school. We pioneered it in Nepal. It was a YWAM, Youth with a Mission training program called a School of Frontier Missions. We had pioneered it. We loved that school. It was a 3-month training with a 2-year internship to send church planners out into the field. It had great content. I mean, really good content. We had different speakers coming in, experts in their fields to train us on cultural anthropology and teach us how to adapt to the culture, teach us how to raise up leaders. We had, you know, people that we would bring in from all over the world to teach. And I really loved it. It was a great program. But when we started looking at the need to evaluate whether or not this system was actually producing what we were aiming at, which was a movement of disciples, we had to realize that at best, it was producing addition growth. And at worst, it was producing very little fruit. And we had to go back to the drawing board and back to God and say, God, what is it that has to change? And we really tried and thought hard about, could we change the actual program? Could we just tweak it? And we tried for a few years, tweaking this, tweaking that, adding a little more practical into it, doing this, doing that. And finally, we came to the conclusion that this system is built for addition. It's not built for multiplication. And so we had to make a complete shift. And believe me, it was a hard change to make. Our School of Frontier Missions, it fit with our existing paradigms. It fit with the YWAM ecosystem of the University of the Nations and how their programs work. It fit with other things. And now we had to go back to God and say, God, what do we really need? And what God was speaking to our hearts was, you need a just-in-time training system where you don't teach people what they need to know 3 years from now. You teach them what they need to know tomorrow. And then you send them out to go do that for a month or two. and then come back and train them with the next skill they need, with the next thing that they need to move forward towards multiplication. So we shifted completely. We shut down all of those School of Frontier missions in South Asia, and it was hard. We definitely got some, kickback on that, people that didn't like us doing that, some leaders we respected, but we shut them all down and we said, we are going to shift to doing a 2.5 day seminar where we train, we practice, we go for several key things, and that's it. We don't have 10 million things that we're trying to teach them or not heavy knowledge. We're going to go for simple skills and obedience, and then we're going to send them out to go and do it. And then we won't train them again until we see that they have done those things. And even if they do come back and haven't done them, we're going to train them on the same thing again until we start to see that. This was not an easy decision, but we did see much, much greater fruit as we begin to move to a completely different system, a system built for multiplication, a system that was built with multiplication and obedience and movement in mind, not built for knowledge. And those early systems were built to give those students, those missionaries, to give them knowledge, not to give them the skills, and to develop in their lives a lifestyle of obedience. So again, I don't think it's about vision, but I think we need to examine our systems and whether or not our systems are actually producing disciples who make disciples. If they're not, we need to go back to the drawing board, being willing to let go of systems that we've developed and put a lot of time into, that we love, that maybe were right for 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but are not right for today and what God is calling us to today. The second thing that I want to emphasize as we think about the difference between addition and multiplication is that sometimes it has to do not only with structure, but it has to do with our mindset about one-on-one disciple making or discipleship. One-on-ones are something that I have loved and appreciated all my life. I love doing them. I love one-on-one. I'm an introvert. I do much better one-on-one. I love when people take time to have a one-on-one with me. I'm an individualistic American, and so I like individual attention and to give individual attention. But when I look at Jesus, he almost never had one-on-one conversations with people. There were a few times, for sure, but the vast majority of the time, Jesus was discipling his disciples. He discipled them as a group. Sometimes it was a group of 3 or 4 he was talking to. Sometimes it was to the 12. But Jesus always discipled people in groups. Addition style discipleship is usually one-on-one, but multiplication discipleship requires inviting other people into the process from the very start and doing it in groups. You can go deep with one person alone, and sometimes that feels better to me, and sometimes that feels better to us. It feels more faithful. It feels more like discipleship. But it can become this addition pattern that actually limits the multiplication of disciples if we focus too much on one-on-one. I was discipled in Youth with a Mission, and YWAM has this amazing part of their DTS, Discipleship Training School. It's called One-on-Ones, right? It's even titled that. At least it used to be. I don't know if it still is. But that discipleship training system came out of an American individualistic mindset and paradigm. And it's really not the way that Jesus discipled. Now, there are small group discussions and things like that. I'm not in any way criticizing YWAM's discipleship training school. It's amazing and transformational. It changed my life, and it can change yours if you're considering doing one. But the mindset of one-on-one can really become a hindrance. Sometimes we think going deep with one person is more spiritual or more relational. And I just want to say, directly, that instinct to protect that depth that you get one-on-one can actually become a blockage to multiplication. When we disciple in groups, there's accountability. And the other thing that happens is you never know who is actually going to be the person who obeys, right? As you're talking to a group, you may even be focusing on one particular person in the questions you're answering, but the periphery people are listening and they're catching what you're saying. And often, many times, I've found that the person I was talking to didn't do anything with it, but their brother or their sister or their friend or their mother who is listening in, they catch it and they run with it. And you see this multiplication released. Sometimes we hold on to our old addition style systems, not because we're, lazy, but we hold on to them because we built them, we know them, and they're also easy for other people to understand, be it your board or denomination or your funding partner or your team. They already are familiar, and so they feel comfortable with that. But when I think about Jesus, I really see that he focused on groups and he focused on things that multiplied. And I want to be like Jesus. Once in a while, his pattern was to disciple one on one, but the vast majority of time, he was going for groups of people who would disciple other groups of people. I talked about the School of Frontier Missions program that we had to can and do a completely new program. But this is not just a problem in missions, though it is. And many mission agencies, I believe, need to re-examine whether or not their systems were built for addition or whether their systems were built for multiplication. But this is also true in the way that we do things in the churches in the West, right? You may have a new members class or a mentoring program. We even often hire discipleship pastors, right? Our church has a discipleship pastor, nothing wrong with that. But we structure things so that it's the professionals who are called the disciplers. We structure things in these models that only professionals can do, and we run training programs without necessarily thinking about, could the people I'm training go train someone else in this same thing? And now I know maybe there's one or two who could, but our goal has to be that everyone we train could go and train someone else in this exact thing that we are training, keeping it simple, keeping it multiplicative, keeping it reproducible from the get-go. And, even running it in a place that doesn't require, a sound system and a PowerPoint and a building. And, how can we think about these things and look at how to make things more reproducible in what we do? Whether it's a 3-month residential training overseas with a 12-week curriculum, or whether it's a church basement in Kansas, the shape of that problem is the same. The problem is that it's addition that's dressed up as a program, right? It's a program that rarely multiplies. It's a program where trainers train and students learn, not we train people to train others, right? And we expect that they will, and we gear everything we do towards that. So I want to give you a closing challenge today. And I also want to just mention that we do have in the show notes a free document, and I'd love for you to download it. It's called the 3 Mindset Shifts, and you will get that for free, and you'll get a chance to really look at some of these mindset shifts that can change how you think about discipleship, especially those of you that are new. I really recommend you download that free document. In fact, let me just put it here in the on the screen so that you guys can see that. Here we go. 3 Mindset Shifts, and there's the URL resources.daretomultiply.com/3 Mindset Shifts. You can grab that And I'd love for you to pick that resource up and continue to think about this addition to multiplication shift that needs to happen. So I wanted to mention that. But let me just say this week, your action step is this. Identify one area where you are still following addition style patterns and haven't fully embraced multiplication style ways of working. And identify it. Ask the Lord, show me what it is. Talk to your team about it. Are there any things in our structure that are really built for addition, not built for multiplication? Now, you may come up with a long list. I'm not asking you to change everything in a day, but start thinking about this and start looking at what could we do differently. Is God actually calling us to even discard some of these programs that we've built and used for years and to shift to something that is more multiplicative? It's something that could multiply, something that could become organic, something that could be simple enough that anybody could learn how to do it. I really encourage you to do that this week. Even if you are a movement leader who has been doing this for years and years and you have seen the multiplication of disciples, is there something that's creeping in that is actually more addition based? Or maybe there's a particular area of the movement, the way that you do prayer or the way that you do fundraising or the way that you do community development that is not multiplication in its very nature, the way that it's been structured, the way it's been built. Think about that. And if you're a pastor in the US or in Germany, I encourage you to do the same. Look at your programs and think, do I have programs or do I have discipleship processes that anybody can do? And God's going to lead us in this as we continue to aim for multiplication and examine these things boldly, courageously, so that God can be glorified in the nations and throughout all of our communities so the lost can know Jesus. Amen. So until next week, please remember, no matter how ordinary you feel, God's dreams for us are always bigger than we can imagine. So let's dare to trust Him for an even greater harvest. God bless. That's all we've got for this episode of Dare to Multiply. One thing that would really help both us and other people who might like to listen in is for you to rate and review the podcast, if you haven't done that yet, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'd also love to connect with you on Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Feel free to message me with any topics, questions you'd like addressed, or guests you'd like me to interview. Until next week, then, please remember, no matter how ordinary you feel, God's dreams for us are always bigger than we can imagine. Let's dare to trust Him for a greater harvest.